What if I told you, the man who changed our understanding of time once struggled to speak? It sounds impossible, right? When people think about Albert Einstein, they imagine a perfect genius, someone born with a brilliant mind, someone who always knew the answers. But the truth is very different. As a child, Einstein was quiet. He spoke slowly. Some people even thought he was not intelligent. In school, he didn't stand out as a top student. He didn't fit into the system. He didn't learn the way others did. And because of that, many people misunderstood him. But here is the key idea. Einstein was not bad at learning. He just thought differently. While other students tried to memorize answers, he asked deeper questions. While others followed rules, he imagined new possibilities. He didn't rush to be fast. He focused on understanding. And that difference changed everything. Einstein once said that imagination is more important than knowledge. Not because knowledge is useless, but because imagination allows you to see what others cannot see. And that is exactly what he did. He didn't just study time, he questioned it. He didn't just accept reality, he challenged it. And through that way of thinking, he transformed science forever. So this is not just a story about a genius. It's a story about a different kind of mind. A quiet boy who refused to think like everyone else. And that leads us to one powerful question. How did a child who struggled to speak become the most famous scientist in history? Albert Einstein was born in Ulm, a small city in southern Germany. Not long after, his family moved to Munich, where he spent most of his early childhood. From the outside, his life looked normal. But inside, something was different. As a young child, Einstein didn't speak much. In fact, he started talking later than most children. When he did speak, he often paused, thinking carefully before forming his sentences. To adults around him, this seemed like a problem. Some even believed he was slow. At school, things didn't get better. The education system at that time was strict and disciplined. Students were expected to memorize information, follow rules, and obey authority without question. But Einstein didn't learn that way. He didn't enjoy repeating facts. He didn't like being told what to think. Instead, he kept asking questions. Questions that didn't always have simple answers. And that made him stand out in the wrong way. Some teachers saw him as difficult. Others thought he would never achieve anything meaningful. One teacher reportedly told him that he would never amount to much. For a child, hearing that can be powerful. It can shape how you see yourself. But here's what they didn't see. Einstein wasn't failing, he was observing. He wasn't distracted, he was thinking. While other students focused on getting the right answers, he was trying to understand the deeper meaning behind them. He often preferred to be alone. Not because he disliked people, but because he enjoyed thinking in silence. In those quiet moments, his mind was active, full of curiosity. He would imagine how things worked, how light moved, how the universe behaved. These were not normal questions for a child. But to him, they felt natural. Another important part of his life was music. Einstein loved playing the violin. For him, music was not just a hobby, it was a way of thinking. When he played, he could relax, reflect, and sometimes even solve problems in his mind. Later in life, he would say that many of his ideas came to him while playing music. So while the world saw a quiet, slow student, there was something much deeper happening beneath the surface. He was building a different kind of intelligence, one based on curiosity, imagination, and independent thinking. And this leads to an important truth. He wasn't a bad student. He just didn't think the way school expected. But being different comes with a cost. Because when you don't fit in, people don't always understand you. And for Einstein, that misunderstanding would follow him into the next stage of his life, where things would become even more difficult. After struggling to fit into traditional school, Albert Einstein finally found a place where he could continue his education. ETH Zurich in Switzerland. It was one of the most respected schools in Europe, and for Einstein, It seemed like a new beginning. But even there, things were not easy. Einstein was intelligent, but he was not a perfect student. He often skipped classes. He didn't always follow instructions. Instead of listening carefully to lectures, he preferred to study topics on his own, in his own way. Some professors saw this as a lack of discipline. They didn't see his potential. They saw a student who didn't fit the system. Because of this, Einstein didn't build strong relationships with his teachers. And that would later become a serious problem. After graduating, he expected to find a teaching position. That was the normal path. But when he applied for jobs, he was rejected. Again and again. No recommendations. No support from professors. No one willing to give him a chance. Months passed. Then more months. Einstein found himself unemployed, uncertain, and increasingly frustrated. He had the education, the ability, but no opportunity. At this point, many people would have given up. But Einstein didn't. Eventually, through a connection, he found a job at a patent office in Bern. It was not a prestigious position. It had nothing to do with advanced physics. His job was simple: review technical inventions and decide whether they were new and useful. Every day looked the same. He sat at a desk. He read documents. He checked designs. He followed rules. It was routine, predictable, ordinary. From the outside, his life looked small. But something important was happening beneath that quiet routine. While working at the patent office, Einstein had time to think. And he used it. Instead of seeing his job as a limitation, he turned it into an advantage. After finishing his daily tasks, he would return to the questions that had always fascinated him. What is light? How does time work? What happens if you move as fast as a beam of light? These were not simple questions, and there were no clear answers. So Einstein did something unusual. He imagined. He created thought experiments, mental scenarios where he could test ideas without needing a laboratory. He would picture himself riding alongside a beam of light. He would imagine clocks moving at different speeds. He would ask, what would happen if the rules we believe are true are not actually true? This kind of thinking required patience. It required focus. And most importantly, it required the courage to question everything. While others were busy building careers, Einstein was building ideas. While others were following established knowledge, he was exploring the unknown. And no one noticed. No awards. No recognition. No fame. Just a quiet man, sitting in an office thinking. But those thoughts were not ordinary. They were slowly forming something powerful. Something that would soon change the world. Because sometimes, the most important work doesn't happen in front of everyone. Sometimes it happens in silence, in uncertainty, in moments when it feels like nothing is happening at all. And that is why this part of Einstein's life matters so much. He was rejected. He was lost. He was overlooked. But he never stopped thinking. And that leads us to one of the most powerful lines in his story. While the world saw an ordinary man, he was thinking about extraordinary questions. And very soon, those questions would turn into answers that would change everything. By 1905, Albert Einstein was still working at the patent office in Bern. No university position. No scientific fame. No one expecting anything extraordinary from him. And yet, this would become the most important year of his life. In just a few months, Einstein published 4 scientific papers. At first, they didn't look dramatic. They were just articles, written quietly, by an unknown clerk. But inside those papers were ideas that would completely change how we understand reality. The first paper explained the photoelectric effect. In simple terms, Einstein showed that light is not just a wave. It can also behave like tiny particles. This idea was revolutionary. It challenged everything scientists believed about light. Years later, this work would earn him the Nobel Prize in Physics. The second paper focused on Brownian motion, the random movement of tiny particles in a liquid. While this might sound simple, It provided strong evidence that atoms truly exist. At the time, not everyone believed in atoms. Einstein helped turn that belief into scientific fact. But it was his third and fourth papers that changed everything. In his work on special relativity, Einstein asked a simple but powerful question. What if the speed of light is always the same, no matter how you move? From that one idea, he reached a shocking conclusion. Time is not absolute. It doesn't move the same way for everyone. If you travel very fast, time can slow down. And space? It's not fixed either. Space and time are connected. Flexible. Not solid, not constant. Changing depending on motion. This was completely different from how people had understood the universe for centuries. Before Einstein, time was seen as something stable, like a clock that ticks the same for everyone. Space was seen as a fixed stage where everything happens. Einstein changed that. He showed that time and space are part of the same system, and that system can bend. Then came one of the most famous equations in history, E=mc². With this simple formula, Einstein revealed that energy and mass are connected. A small amount of mass can turn into a huge amount of energy. It was a short equation, but its meaning was enormous. Suddenly, the universe looked different. Time was no longer fixed. Space was no longer stable. Matter and energy were no longer separate. Everything was connected. And all of this came from a man sitting at a desk, thinking deeply about simple questions. At first, not everyone understood his work. Some scientists were confused. Others were skeptical. But slowly, as experiments confirmed his ideas, the world began to realize what had happened. Physics had changed. Not gradually, not slowly, but in one single year. 1905 is now known as Einstein's miracle year. But it wasn't a miracle. It was the result of years of curiosity, quiet thinking, and the courage to question basic assumptions. Einstein didn't just solve problems. He changed the way problems were asked. And that is why his impact was so powerful. Because once you change the questions, you change the entire direction of knowledge. From an unknown patent clerk to a man who reshaped our understanding of reality. This was the moment everything shifted. And yet, with recognition would come something new, fame, pressure, and consequences that Einstein could never fully control. After 1905, the world slowly began to recognize the brilliance of Albert Einstein. What started as quiet papers written in isolation turned into global attention. Scientists began to study his work. Universities invited him to speak. And over time, his name became known far beyond the world of physics. In 1921, Einstein received the Nobel Prize in Physics. It was one of the highest honors in science. But interestingly, he did not receive it for relativity, the idea we now connect most closely with his name. He received it for his work on the photoelectric effect. Even then, his most revolutionary ideas were still difficult for many people to fully understand. But fame continued to grow. Einstein became more than a scientist. He became a symbol of intelligence, of curiosity, of human potential. His image was recognized around the world. His voice carried influence, not just in science, but in society. Then, history took a darker turn. In the 1930s, Europe became increasingly dangerous. With the rise of political extremism, Einstein, who was Jewish, was forced to leave his home. He emigrated to the United States, where he would spend the rest of his life. But even in a new country, far from danger, the world was moving towards something much bigger. War. During this time, scientists began to understand that Einstein's famous equation, E=mc², could be used in ways no one had imagined before. It suggested that an enormous amount of energy could be released from a small amount of matter. And that idea could become a weapon. Einstein himself did not build the atomic bomb. But in 1939, he signed a letter to Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning that Nazi Germany might develop such a weapon. This letter helped start what would later become the Manhattan Project. It was a moment of fear, a moment of urgency, but also a moment of conflict. Because Einstein was not a man of war. He believed in peace. He believed in humanity. And yet, his ideas were now connected to one of the most destructive weapons in history. After the war, Einstein spoke openly about his regrets. He wished he had done more to prevent the use of nuclear weapons. He spent the rest of his life advocating for peace, trying to guide the world toward a safer future. And this reveals something important. Being intelligent does not mean you have control over how your ideas are used. It does not mean you will always make the right decisions. It does not protect you from difficult consequences. Einstein reached the highest level of success. He changed science forever. He became one of the most recognized people in history. And still, he faced uncertainty, pressure, and moral struggle. Because in the real world, knowledge is powerful. But it is not always simple. And that leads us to a deeper truth. Intelligence gives you power, but not always the answers. And in the end, Einstein's greatest legacy was not just what he discovered, but what he learned about life, responsibility, and being human. The life of Albert Einstein is not just a story about science. It's a story about thinking differently, and having the courage to stay that way. Because when you look back, his success didn't come from being perfect. It didn't come from being the best student. It didn't come from following the rules. It came from something much simpler and much more powerful. He accepted that he was different. While others tried to fit in, he chose to think in his own way. And that difference became his greatest strength. He stayed curious, not just for a short time, but for his entire life. He didn't stop asking questions, even when those questions were difficult, or when no one else understood them. He thought deeply. In a world that often values speed, Einstein showed the power of slowing down, of taking time to truly understand, instead of rushing to find quick answers. And most importantly, he was patient. Because real success doesn't happen instantly. It takes years of thinking, failing, questioning, and trying again. Einstein once said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge." And another time he said, "I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious." These are not just quotes. They are reminders that you don't need to be perfect to achieve something meaningful. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You just need to stay curious and keep going. So now, let me ask you something. What is one question you've never stopped thinking about? Take a moment. Think about it. Because that question might be more important than you realize. If this story made you think differently, comment your answer below. Like this video if you believe thinking differently is a strength. And subscribe for more stories that help you learn English through real lives and powerful ideas. And remember, Einstein didn't just change science. He changed how we see the world.